Hello friends, the topic is nerve muscle physiology, and in this topic we are going to discuss about the neuron and neuroglial cells and about the exoplasmic transport. So let us start. Now this is the structure of neuron and neuroglial cells. So you can see here, this is the neuron which consists of cell body, dendrites, axon and axonal terminals, and these axons may be myelinated and non-myelinated. So this whole part is considered as neurons, and beside this there are certain structures which are present along with these neurons are called neuroglial cells, which may be oligodendrocytes, which may be microglia, astrocytes. These are the neuroglial cells. So what is the difference between the neurons and neuroglial cell? So neuron, which is the basic unit of the nervous system, while glial cells, they are the non-neuronal cells. They are non-neuronal cells and they usually supports the neuron. So the main function of this glial cell is to provide support to the neurons. However, these neurons, which are the basic unit of the nervous system, are mainly responsible for transmitting electrical signal throughout the body. So all the signals throughout the body are transmitted through the neurons. So action potentials develop in the neurons, while in glias or neuroglias there is no action potential generation or there is no chemical synapse. So they are basically responsible for supporting the neuron and they are the non-neuronal cells. Now let's know the various types of the cells which are present in neurons and the various type of the cells which are present in glial cells. Now neurons are broadly divided into four types. These neurons may be unipolar, it may be bipolar, multipolar, or it may be pseudo-unipolar. So neuron may be unipolar, bipolar, multipolar or pseudo-unipolar. However, these glial cells, they are of various types. They may be astrocytes, they may be ependymal cells, oligodendrocytes, microglia, satellite cells and Schwann cells. So these all cells are the neuroglial cells, which are our non-neuronal cells. Now first we discuss about the cells present in the neurons or classification on the neurons on the basis of structures. So neurons ideally consist of cell body, axon and axonal terminals. So on the basis of number of axons originated from the cell bodies, it may be unipolar, bipolar, pseudo-unipolar and multipolar. So unipolar means there is a single cell body and single part originated from the cell body, that is the single axon. So this type of neuron is unipolar. Now bipolar neuron means from single cell body there is a rise two polar, there are two parts, that is the bipolar, and pseudo unipolar is means from the cell body there is a single projection, that is unipolar, but later on it may bifurcate to appear to be a bipolar or multipolar. So this type of neurons are pseudo unipolar, and if there is a multiple projection from the cell body like this, it is known as multipolar. So this is the most common type of neurons where from cell body arises dendrites, various dendrites and axons. So it is a multipolar. Now, these are the various types of the neurons present in a body, and these unipolar neurons, they have one process extended from the cell body, and primarily these types of unipolar neurons are present in usually central nervous system of the invertebrates. Mostly neurons in the central nervous of invertebrates are unipolar, and it may present in a vertebrates as a primary afferents of spinal and some cranial nerves. So some cranial or spinal nerves primary afferents may be unipolar. Now the pseudo unipolar, this type of neurons, they are mostly sensory neurons, okay, and these type of neuron are basically present in dorsal root ganglia of the spinal nerve. So it is important, it is present on the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal nerves. So in them neuron is the pseudo unipolar neurons. Now the next type is bipolar, where there is a two distinct process arises from the single cell body, and this type of bipolar neurons are present in eyes, especially rod and cone cells of the retina, and in olfactory system. In olfactory system and in rod and cone cells of retina, the type of neuron is the bipolar neurons. Next, multipolar neurons, these are the multiple extension from the cell bodies, and these are the most commonest type of the presentation of the neuron, and it is present mostly on the motor neuron, and majority of the neurons in the central nervous system and peripheral nervous systems are motor neuron. Clear? Now come to the type of cells in neuroglia. There is a various types of cells in central nervous system, neuroglial cells, and there are especially two types of neuroglial cells which are present in peripheral nervous systems. In central nervous system, the neuroglia which are present are astrocytes, microglial cell, ependymal cells, and oligodendrocytes. These are the neuroglial cells present in the central nervous system. Central nervous system is brain and spinal cord. However, in the peripheral nervous system, like in cranial nerves and in spinal nerves, the type of neuroglial cells present are Schwann cells, which are responsible for myelination, and satellite cells. These are the two specialized cells which are present in the peripheral nervous system. So it is, you can visualize clearly the whole classification of the neuroglial cell both in central nervous system and in peripheral nervous system. So in central nervous system there is a astrocytes, ependymal cells, oligodendrocytes and microglia. However, in peripheral nervous system, satellite cells and Schwann cells. So we can discuss now each of them one by one. So first is astrocytes. So astrocytes, they are star in shape and they are mainly present as a blood brain barrier. So its function is to maintain the blood brain barriers. So astrocytes, as name suggests, they are star shell. They appear as a star appearance, and these are of two types. They are the fibrous astrocytes and protoplasmic astrocytes. So the fibrous astrocytes are found in white matter, and protoplasmic type of astrocyte cells are present in gray matter. So they are the differentiating points, and when it comes to the function, these are the astrocytes, okay, and they connected to the blood capillaries, so they form blood brain barrier. Secondly, they also form connections and through which they can uptake the potassium ion and neurotransmitters. Besides this, they are also responsible for providing nutritive or nutrition to the neuron. So the main function of the astrocyte is they can act as a blood-brain barrier responsible for uptaking neurotransmitters and potassium ions, and they provide nutrition to the neurons. Second type of cell is ependymal cells. Ependymal cells, these are the ependymal cells. They are simply a single layer of the columnar or cuboidal cells, and which is usually ciliated. You can see it is a ciliated, this is the cilia of ependymal cells, or they have a microvilli. And this type of ependymal cells are mainly present around the linings of ventricles of brain and central canal of spinal cord. So it lines the ventricles of the brain and the central canal of the spinal cord. So they are responsible for formation of cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, the ventricles of the brain is responsible for the formation of the cerebrospinal fluid, and these ependymal cells, they can monitor and they can assist in the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, and they can also act as a blood-brain barrier because it connected to the both to the ventricles and also to the capillaries. Next type of microglia is oligodendrocytes. These oligodendrocytes are specially responsible for myelination of the axons. The axons के myelination में importantly role है central nervous system के axon में myelination is occurs due to oligodendrocytes, and oligodendrocyte is responsible for myelination of सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम. सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम न्यूरॉन्स के जो माइलिनेशंस के लिए जो इम्पोर्टेंट न्यूरोग्लिया है, दैट इज द oligodendrocytes, and Schwann cells are responsible for myelination of neurons present in the peripheral nervous system. So in the peripheral nervous system, like cranial nerves and in spinal nerves, myelination occurs through Schwann cells, and in the central nervous system the myelination occurs to the oligodendrocytes. And there is another difference between them is these oligodendrocytes responsible for multiple myelination. It means single oligodendrocytes can myelinate multiple neurons. However, these Schwann cells, they can cause myelination of single nerve. So each Schwann cells myelinate only one nerve fibers. So it is a basic difference between the myelination by the oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells. Next type of neuroglia is microglia. Microglia, they are mainly responsible for the phagocytic actions. Whenever there is any inflammatory reactions there is a release of the cytokines, and they are responsible for entering at that site and responsible for engulfing the debris. So they are mainly responsible for phagocytosis. Now next type of neuroglia which is present in peripheral nervous system is the satellite cells. These are the satellite cells. They are especially responsible for providing nutrients to the surrounding neurons. So it is responsible for providing nutrition. It also has some structural function also. It can also act as a protective and cushioning the cells, and beside this they also express a variety of receptors that allow for range of interaction with the neuroactive chemicals. So as a receptor, it also act as a receptor. So it acts as a receptor, as a protector, as a Cushing cell and structural function, and it also provides nutrition to the surrounding neurons. And the Schwann cells, there is especially two roles of the Schwann cells. One is the myelination of the axons outside the brain, that is the peripheral nervous system. In the peripheral nervous system, this myelination occurs through the Schwann cell, and beside this, the Schwann cell is also responsible for development, maintenance, function and regeneration of the peripheral nerve. So whenever there is an injury to the peripheral nerves, regeneration of the peripheral nerves occurs due to the activation of these Schwann cells. So these Schwann cells are responsible for regeneration of peripheral nerve cells. So these are all type of neuroglial cells. So let us recap this neuroglial cell. These, like in central nervous system, there is a astrocytes, ependymal cells, oligodendrocytes and microglia. Astrocytes they are star shaped and maintain the blood-brain barrier, control the level of neurotransmitter around the synapses, and also it regulates the ions and provides the metabolic supports. Ependydymal cells, they mainly lines the ventricles of the brain and central canal of the spinal cord, and they are involved in the production of the cerebrospinal fluid. Oligodendrocytes, they are mainly responsible for myelination of central nervous system so as to provide the structural framework. Microglia, they are the mainly immune cells present in the brain, and they are responsible for removing dead cell and pathogens by phagocytosis. So they remove the debris by phagocytosis. So these are the neuroglia present in the central nervous system. And in peripheral nervous system, there is a satellite cells which surrounds the neuronal cell bodies in the ganglions. It can surround the neuronal cell bodies in the ganglions, and they also regulate neurotransmitter levels, and they have a multiple functions. Lastly, Schwann cells, they can myelinate neurons in the peripheral nervous system, and second important role of the Schwann cell is maintenance and regeneration of neurons after injury. So after injury, regeneration of the neurons occurs through this Schwann cells. So I hope you can understand this topic. Let us do some questions so for your better understanding. And before that, just complete another topic, that is the exoplasmic transport. What is exoplasmic transport? It is a transport of the chemicals, vesicles and cell organelles along the interior of the axon. So this is the axon, and all the chemicals or neurotransmitter or vesicles or organelles which are formed or present in these cell bodies or cyton or soma, they can transport it to distant part internally through the axon, and this transport of these chemicals, vesicles or organelles along this interior of the axon is known as exoplasmic transport, because all these vesicles, neurotransmitters or chemicals, they are all synthesized in the cell body, and after synthesizing in the cell body, they are transmitted to the axon or axon terminal or distant part, and this transportation is known as exoplasmic transport. There is a two ways of exoplasmic transport. One is the anterograde axonal transport, and another is retrograde axonal transport. Now, what is anterograde axonal transport? Whenever there is a transport of these chemicals from cell body to the nerve terminus. Okay, from this cell body to the nerve terminus, if there is a transportation of this chemical or vesicles, then it is known as anterograde axonal transport. However, then there is a transport of the chemicals or empty vesicles from axonal terminals to the cell body, then it is known as retrograde axonal transport. So, the chemicals which are formed in the cell bodies are released and transported through the axon to the terminals is known as the anterograde axonal transport, and after utilization of this, after utilization of this empty vesicles, they are transported back to the cell body for further reuse of this for the manufacturing of neurotransmitter or other chemicals, so they can revert back to the cell body, and this process is known as retrograde axonal transport. So transport may be anterograde and it may be retrograde. So now let's revise by doing some questions. What first is dorsal root ganglia have? So the dorsal root ganglia have this type of neurons: unipolar, multipolar, bipolar and pseudo-unipolar. So the correct answer is pseudo-unipolar. Next question is axonal transport is anterograde, retrograde, anterograde and retrograde, and none. So from the previous slide, now you can better understand that the axonal transport is both anterograde and retrograde transport. And the last question is myelin sheath in the central nervous system is produced by Myelination in the central nervous system is done by the correct oligodendrocytes. They are responsible for myelination in central nervous system, while Schwann cell is responsible for myelination in peripheral nervous system. Microglia for phagocytosis and macroglia include astrocyte, oligodendrocyte. These are all macroglia. So the correct answer is myelin sheaths. Thank you so much. I hope you understand this topic very well.